thanks again for doing this. It's a pleasure meeting you.
My great privilege.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I believe I read you were born in Washington, D.C.
That's right. My dad was born there, and so was I.
Okay. What did your parents do?
Well, my dad was a banker in the city, very close to the White House, actually. And my mom stayed at home with the four of us children.
What kind of values did they give the family to the kids?
Well, that's a wonderful question. There was a strong value base from my grandparents and my parents. We actually had a link here to Illinois. My grandfather had been a professor at Wheaton College in Illinois here, and my dad and mom had met there at the college, or recorded there anyway. And so we were taught from the earliest age of the importance of values and things that had enduring impact that would bring glory to God.
Mm-hmm. Well, along those lines, I read a really nice quote from you during a recent speech, maybe the last couple of years ago, about three people who were really important to you in helping shape your thinking and your values: Arthur Holmes, John Stott, and Mark Hatfield. Tell me about that. How did you get interested in what they would have to say?
Well, that is you read widely about me. That's very kind of you. And yes, indeed, all three of those men had impact. Mark Hatfield, of course, was a U.S. Senator from Oregon. I was there in Washington, D.C. I grew up kind of during the Vietnam era, and he was a Republican. And he believed in the market and this sort of thing, but he also was not embraced by the Nixon administration, and was against the war, and was very anxious to advance justice and human concerns as a Republican. And I was taken by this. He also had a strong faith conviction in his legislative work, and so he stood out as someone that, although rooted in the free market benefits to our country and the world, knew that just power that was not contained and shall we say, in our system, where no power is allowed just to go unmanaged, that impressed me. Then I became acquainted with Dr. John Stott, who was a minister in London. When I went to London, I'd known about him previously, but I'd never personally met him. When I went to London as a banker, I was interested in his global vision and belief that the Christian faith impacted dramatically all peoples, and his sense that all peoples in the planet, wherever they were, whomever they were, could flourish. And he talked often in his term about the two-thirds world, even though he was right there in the heart of London. And that actually influenced me a lot in terms of my own desire ultimately to go to Deere, where there was a very global reach. Even when I left the bank to go to Moline, to Deere, about 30 years ago, that vision that he had of people from whatever faith, wherever you were, to flourish.
Yeah, Paul Simon I'm working on a documentary about Paul.
Sure.
And one of the things, he was from Lutheran missionary stock.
Yes.
And his feeling was, when one of us is diminished, we all are diminished in some way.
Yes.
This is coming through.
Yes, this was exactly, and he was also, and didn't his brother run Bread for the World, as I recall? I mean, you can see the values in there, to your point. And he also was very big on languages, as I recall, which did impact me as well. I attribute my interest in languages to have been very valuable at Deere. And his book, early on, I can't recall the name right now.
Tongue-Tied American.
Thank you, Tongue-Tied American, exactly. And very insightful, and I still am a believer in the benefits of this.
We're a little off topic, but I'm having fun too. You went into banking. What led you to Deere, downstate Illinois, the Quad Cities area?
I was a banker here in Chicago after having gotten my MBA at the University of Chicago, and I was given the privilege to go to Germany. Deere was my largest customer there in Germany. Deere had been a customer prior to my assignment in Germany. And when I came back, I was very fortunate to be offered a job to come and join Deere. I've been very impressed with this company way back then. I saw it as a very global reach. I had an interest in global things. Growing up in DC, my grandfather had taken my brother and I off into the National Geographic lectures there. Every Friday night we would go, and there would be, or not every Friday night, but often on Friday nights we would go together and learn something about the world. And I just sensed that, ironically, you could go to this small town in Illinois, having grown up in the DC area and working here in Chicago. I thought it was quite ironic that I would go to a small town in Illinois and end up being able to spend a good bit of my career covering every part of the world.
So it's kind of a natural fit.
Well, I think it did. I think it was a great fit, and that was one of the aspirations. I sensed that this company could be one of the great companies in the world, serving people's real needs, whether you were in Kazakhstan or a country in Africa, or in South America, wherever you were, Russia, India, China.
You worked a lot for Deere at home and abroad. You were in many different countries, in the agribusiness area, farming equipment, big equipment. How did those experiences at home and abroad inform your view of what this company could be?
Well, early on, even when thinking about coming to work at Deere, I thought about what its potential was. Of course, it already had a broad footprint globally. It has products. Deere has products, and even to this day, under the leadership of Sam Allen and the great team that's leading Deere today, it's continuing to grow and extend.
That happened at just the right time. Is that over with? Or?
Yeah, this is a doorbell.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
Maybe we want to replay this.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's take that from the top.
Yeah.
You had a lot of experiences, and as you said, Deere had a broad global kind of footprint even in your early years. What attracted you to that?
I had. I think in growing up in Washington, D.C., one of the positive influences was my grandfather took my brother and I out to the National Geographic lectures there in Constitution Hall, which were lectures that preceded the articles that came out in that yellow journal. And so I had the privilege of being exposed to things that were going around the world. We talked about John Stott and others, a sense of people flourishing all around the world. And I sensed that Deere offered products that could be valuable and useful to people in every corner of the world. This was a great opportunity. Now, Deere is much more global today than it was then, and in particular, it's much more profitable. And because it's delivering very fine products, and therefore it legitimately earns a good return on the money invested overseas. And that's continuing even to this day under my successor, Sam Allen, and his team, who are just doing a great job there at Deere in taking the company even more global. That was a great visceral interest, and I'm sure what attracted me to want to make the move to Moline.
A good friend of mine works as a consultant in agribusiness, particularly with equipment dealerships in the United States and Canada. He said the thing that struck me about the time when Lane took over Deere was it was a company that was poised to really make some moves, but it really hadn't. They hadn't caught fire yet. What was your view of the company at the time when you took over as CEO, and where you thought it could go, and how you motivated it to go that way?
Well, the company has had the benefit of some wonderful leaders. I was only the 8th CEO in the company history, And particularly starting with Bill Hewitt, who was the last of the family members, and his successors, Bob Hansen and Hans Becker. The company continued to invest and to make the moves that needed to be done to be ready to go even further. And I suspect my successor and his successor, whoever she may be, will take it even further. But my particular opportunity was to help the company not only serve customers well overseas, but to earn a good return in doing it. And in fact, the fundamental message to my colleagues, and we had the same story to the United Auto Workers, to our investors, to our suppliers, and that was that the way we were going to earn a return was to deliver exceptional service to our customers. And because it's a very long-term vision, which was just very exciting to me at Deere, is that you doing the right thing in the right way over the long run, you can earn a wonderful return. And our returns had not yet been where we aspired for them to be. And that was what we were able to do.
I read that one of the first things that you did is when you took over was to move your desk out of the executive suite upstairs down to where people were actually doing the work. What was behind all that?
Well, that's maybe a little apocryphal. I think I just turned my desk in a different direction for a little symbolism, but I did have a great appreciation for the employee group that had been built up over many generations. Deere has really a very global workforce, even more so now, and I really enjoyed sensing what the potential was of this global workforce. And seeing people, just take for example combines, the combine harvesters, this marvelous machine. This is a factory on wheels of mobile information machines with 17,000 parts. And you had people working in China, in Brazil, in Germany, and in the Quad Cities, all in 4 different factories, all building these combines that would serve the harvesting needs of the world.
What was your core vision for John Deere when you assumed the leadership role and taking those extra steps, really making that impact in the global marketplace and bringing the shareholder more value back home?
Well, the total management team and the extended management team around the world really pulled together well. It was maybe summarized in what we put on the cover of the annual report for many years, and that was building a business as great as our products. We sensed that our products, both our construction equipment products, which is the division where I actually started, and our agricultural products were great products. Now, they could be better. We worked very hard to make them better, and they still are working at that, but they still qualified for great. We sensed we had a good business. It was an investment-grade business, nothing shabby about it, but we believed that the business could be at the high level like the products, and so this was an aspiration. We put this on the cover. So if you want to, for many years, that same motto. And so we worked very hard to have a business which was recognized. And when it is a great business like that, it continues to reinvest. It can do what Deere is doing right now, and that is stretch even further as the needs of our customers are more and more sophisticated and technical.
And speak to that if you would, because when you got into the business, GPS was something the military was doing, but now combines and tractors and all manner of farm equipment use this to do very precise, to do the best job possible and get the best return.
Yes, the ability for precision farming has made our customers, who were always one of the more productive elements of society. A lot of people don't realize how productive our farmers are. Not only U.S. farmers, which are as productive as any in the world, but whether you're talking about farmers in all the great farming areas of the world, how productive they can be. We provide tools to increase their productivity, and we ourselves want to be productive. And that precision farming using GPS so that you can drop when you are planting with our very sophisticated seeding equipment, you can come back, and when you harvest, you know exactly where you've planted, and there's not waste in seed. It's very fine stewardship, and stewardship was kind of one of the themes of our whole thing, was to be a good steward at the company and for our customers.
I want to get into that too in a little bit. What were the business ethics that guided the company under your leadership? I read no smoke and mirrors. There had to be absolute transparency in the way we did business.
Thank you for asking about this. When I was given the privilege at the Lincoln ceremony to talk for 2 or 3 minutes, I shared that exact phrase with the audience, and that is that the how we did business was exceedingly important. In fact, often a job for a CEO like me is, how do you communicate with your thousands of employees what's really important? I made it a point over the almost decade that I had the privilege to lead the company to underline only one word in every letter I wrote, and I always underlined it, and only underlined this one word, and that was the word how we did business. And so over time this took on a brand, the how, what we did, and it was summarized often the way you just described it. It was no smoke, no mirrors, no tricks, total transparency right down the middle. And that's how we aspire to do business, and that everybody heard the same story, whether it was the president of the United Auto Workers, whether it was our investors, whether it were our employees, our dealers, our suppliers, all the different constituents, the people in government with whom we worked. We all heard the same story, and that was what we aspired to do. We weren't a perfect company, but that was our aspiration, to deliver that kind of product and relationship with everyone with whom we dealt.
There was an anecdote about you telling people to be ready to come back in 2037 for the 200th anniversary of Deere, because it was going to be bigger and better than ever. We were going to be in the business, and we were, could you speak to that?
Well, it was a fun day. We had a worldwide management meeting, and I asked everyone to bring in those days almost everyone had a BlackBerry. As their so-called, and I asked everyone to bring their BlackBerry, and people were a little nervous. Why is he wanting everyone to bring a BlackBerry to lunch? And when we got there, I asked them all to open it up, and I said, go to your calendars for, I believe it was the 1st of February 2037. And I asked everyone to look at their calendar. Most people didn't even realize that your calendars would go out that far, but sure enough, I explained how it would happen. I said, if anyone doesn't have a conflict on that day, mark down the 200th birthday of this company, because most of us, by the grace of God and the gift of modern health, which we most of us will enjoy, not necessarily all of us, but most of us will, we can all be there. Most of us probably won't be working for the company at that time. Most of us in that room would hope to be retired, but we could all be at this 200th birthday party, where we will celebrate the values that we believe will continue on because of the way we're passing them on to our successors, and the kind of work we're doing with our customers. Now the point is, we didn't have any guarantee that our company wouldn't go the way of a lot of other great names. There's no guarantee. The only way we will have our 200th birthday is that we continue to do the job of serving our customers exceedingly well, in a way that investors are very well rewarded.
And it worked very well under your tenure. I saw where revenues, record growth, revenues more than doubling between 2000 and 2008. It was a practice that worked.
The revenues certainly it reflected the global growth of the company, but in particular we were delighted with the profitability and the return on our investment. We worked very hard on what we called shareholder value added, which was an economic profit concept, which I had learned at the University of Chicago, and the need to invest well what we were doing. And so everybody was incented. Our compensation programs were all organized around this economic value. And so and my successor has continued this, and I'm just thrilled with the evidence that by serving customers well, in a way that serves investors well, the momentum is not only continuing but accelerating.
What kinds of standards did you set for yourself? I read in one of your speeches, you talked about the difference between self-interest and stewardship leadership. 1 Corinthians, for example.
Well, thank you for asking that. Yes, people in leadership at Deere, and we hoped in many places of leadership, would aspire that what we were there for was as a steward, and that by serving the institution, our customers, other people well, the byproduct of that was our own personal benefit, whether it was the joy of working in an environment of an effective team, delivering great products to people in Turkmenistan or in Argentina or Ethiopia, wherever we were. And in addition, of course, remuneration reflecting sustained good performance. And that was the byproduct. And sometimes people would get that in reverse and think that the institution was there as a means to enrich themselves, which is, it's really the reverse. It's the institution was to be served, and when I say institution, I mean the mission of the institution, which was our customers and our employees, that they would have enriching, fulfilling careers. And that's why so many people, I think, chose to stay at Deere. Many people never realized they were going to do a full career at Deere, but they came and found that their lives, not only were their wallets getting fatter, but the enrichment of daily living, which is a gift beyond price.
We've actually already hit on a lot of this, but I'll ask the question, what during your time at Deere gave you the most personal satisfaction over what was accomplished during your tenure?
Well, for a personal satisfaction was to see so many individuals so engaged and working together. We used to talk about the fact that although we had, fortunately, quite a few geniuses among us, most of us were ordinarily talented people that we were able to do such extraordinary things because of pulling together. If you get that many people pulling in the same direction, which, by the way, is not the easiest thing to do when you come from so many nationalities, so many points of view, so many religions in the world, all pulling together, that was a great joy. And so to look into the eyes of employees all around the world as we would travel, I often had the great privilege towards the latter part of my career, to have my wife, who's now been married to me about 41 years, to come with me and to be able to look at employees and talk to them individually and see how they were thriving, flourishing, and blossoming. And in doing that, the company was then flourishing. This is very satisfying, and it's hard to describe the joy that it brings to life. And I was able to share it with my own children, and it was so wonderful to have them and some of my grandchildren at the Lincoln ceremony. Actually, in fact, all the grandchildren came to the event in the city.
That's terrific. Well, you've moved on from John Deere Company. What's your life like today? What are you doing today?
Well, I'm still, I have a wonderful afterglow of the privilege to serve at John Deere, and a wonderful joy of watching my successor and his team and the board continue to take the company to new heights. Which, by the way, I always felt and talked often with the board when I was the chairman of the board about one of the key responsibilities of a leader is to have a good succession plan. And so your real judgment comes from how that is working later on. So the jury is still out, but so far I'm very encouraged and delighted. So that's one aspect of my life, but of course that's from a distance. I'm a cheerleader from afar, and delighted to be doing that. I live here in Chicago now. Patty and I, we live right downtown where we can walk to most all events. We love the symphony and the lyric opera here. We love all of the opportunities for culture and fine restaurants and sports. I have 5 grandchildren here. Patty and I love being involved in their lives. 2 of our children and their spouses live here. My 3rd child lives in Tanzania, where he's a teacher at an international school near Mount Kilimanjaro, and we enjoy going and seeing him. I also travel quite a bit still. I'm very involved in boards. I have the University of Chicago board here, where I have the privilege to serve on the executive committee and chair the audit committee for this wonderful university, reaching into the corners of research and rigorous inquiry to the advancement of humankind. And then I'm on 4 corporate boards, which are very global in their totality, and I still enjoy traveling quite a bit to many parts of the world. I'm headed to Brazil shortly, and I'll be in Russia for the Olympics this February, and look forward to doing some teaching in China next May with Dartmouth, and I'm very honored to have these privileges, and life is full and rich. I also have had the privilege to be a cancer survivor, not what you would choose to do, but I lived very close to Northwestern University here, and walked 50 times last year to Northwestern Hospital. It was just wonderful to be so close and to have such wonderful care. And these modern drugs, I'm the beneficiary of research that's gone into those instruments of God's healing, of which I am very, very grateful.
I'm 3 years on myself.
Well, wonderful. Well, I trust it will continue.
Yeah,
Yes.
hope.
Yes, we have that great hope, and so many people today, it's something that can be managed, whereas if we had it 30 years ago, it would have been for many of us a death sentence, and today it's something that can be managed as a chronic disease. So there are many of us, roughly 12 million people in the United States are cancer survivors today, which is not a small number.
I was lucky. It was not something that involved a lot of aftercare or anything, but just the realization, just hearing that word was enough.
Yeah, it's a scary proposition, and I'm very grateful for the incredible support of my colleagues at Deere and friends and loved ones, and for the wonderful care here I had when I did my 6 months of chemotherapy.
You're also engaged in civic life. You mentioned the University of Chicago, Lincoln Park Zoo, Lyric Opera, Council on Foreign Relations.
Yes, I have the privilege to be. I'm not active in managing these organizations at the board level. I'm an honorary director at the zoo, and I'm a national director at the Lyric Opera. We're very enthusiastic supporters of these organizations. My wife is on the board of the Chicago Symphony here, which we're very enthusiastic supporters. My wife is also on the board of the Urban Education Initiative at the University of Chicago, which is working very hard on bringing excellent education to those on where in the city here, where it's often tough to get a great education, and it's such an important factor. So yeah, those are great privileges to say the least.
A couple more questions, and we're in pretty good shape. You have an opportunity through your academic institutions that you are tied with, like the University of Chicago. You have an opportunity to talk to young people about the world of business. What advice do you give them as they start out on this career path? Its rewards, its pitfalls, its challenges and opportunities.
Well, I do have that privilege, and in fact, I had the good fortune to give a graduation speech at Dartmouth not too long ago at the Tuck School there of graduates going into the world of business, and I talked to them about the opportunity to serve. Business is a chance to serve that humans can flourish. And we still have 3 billion people on the planet which are living in very, very primitive conditions. We've been very fortunate in the last even 50 years to see a dramatic number of people come out of poverty, and there's a huge opportunity across the globe. The United States is only 5% of the world's population for for all human beings to flourish and thrive, and business people are a key to making the investment decisions so that humans can be all that they are made to be. And sadly, this is not yet the case. And few professions exist where this is a possibility. So I urge people to view their work as a service to humankind. And of course, we talked about the values. Values are exceedingly important. And you exercise small little ethical muscles if you want to exercise big ethical muscles. A lot of people say, I would never make a big ethical mistake, but they don't realize that the way to do this is to start by being absolutely insistent that what you say is what you mean. And then the same, no smoke, no tricks, no mirrors, straight down the middle with everyone with whom you deal. It's not the easiest thing, but it's a wonderful aspiration from the very beginning as to how to spend your life in the service of other people and to see humans reach their full potential wherever they are, in India or in Nigeria or Indonesia, wherever they are, and of course here in the United States as well.
What were your thoughts when you learned that you were going to be named a laureate of the Lincoln Academy?
Well, I was deeply honored, to say the least. And it's particularly appropriate this year. We're just about to reach the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, which I remember memorizing as a boy, and the words of that. And so our land of Lincoln, Illinois, is the land of Lincoln. John Deere is headquartered here in Illinois. I've had the privilege to spend most of my life actually in Illinois. And so to be able to join so many other people from multiple fields, I think this is what's particularly exciting. To the Lincoln Academy recognizes people who have made a mark in multiple very interesting fields of the human pursuit. And I was thrilled and continue to be most appreciative of this generous recognition.
At the end of my questions, is there anything that I might not have touched upon that you want to bring up?
Well, you've done a wonderful job, I have to say. Thank you for doing the research. I think you've done a great job. Thank you for allowing me to cover the waterfront.
Oh, it's fun.
You did a great job.
Thank you. It's really rewarding to hear these kinds of stories. Something we're talking about very early on. And I'm going back to the Paul Simon documentary because I'm just about to wrap it up.
As you can tell, both him and his brother have impacted me. Both his work in the Senate and then his book, that I mentioned, Tongue-Tied American, which I couldn't remember the name, but you knew it.
One of the things that he was son of Lutheran missionaries to China, and we asked him about, how did your religious background touch upon, shape your life? He said, my dad was a preacher, and but he grew up on a dairy farm. And he said, even your cows ought to know you're a Christian by the way you treat them. Meaning, if you treat the livestock well, how much better should you treat your fellow human beings? He said, it's a good philosophy of government. He said, it's a good way to live.
Absolutely.
I just love that comment.
That's a wonderful comment. And I wish that he was still with us to his values were, and so in a way for me to try to bring business values synced to that, where often people get off track to too much greed and selfishness. Sadly. I think he represented, the appropriate vision of where we wanted to take society. Yeah. Business is a means to that rather than an end. In fact, that might be a point. If you wanted to ask me a question, we could ask about that. I've talked before about the means and the ends, and that often that's where people get confused. I think that would be maybe interesting.
Well, let me see if I can ask that. What about the means to an end in terms of a moral pathway, if you will, in the world of business?
Well, business, in my view, and often in the talks I've been able to give and share, and hopefully in the way we have conducted our business at Deere, is a means to an end. And the end is humans flourishing. And business, capitalism itself, is only a means to humans being fulfilled. And when people get confused and get the business or the system as the end, then often we get into difficulty. But when we view business as a means conducted in the right way, delivering quality products that you're proud of, that people will enrich their lives, and delivering them in a way, and which is hard to do often, to deliver them in a way that make money. So you deliver great value to customers. You have to be very disciplined. It's harder work. At Deere, people have to work very hard to be able to both satisfy customers completely and yet at the same time do it in a way very cost efficiently and investing well and effectively to allow shareholders to benefit. That is a means then to humans flourishing. Is a wonderful, useful philosophy. Capitalism itself is a means. If there was a better means, we'd prefer that, but it's the best means that we know of today to bring millions out of poverty into an enriched life, in my judgment.
That's very well said. I'm glad
yeah, thank you for asking that. Because
yeah.
that is where, you know, sometimes people just don't, and business, you know, business leaders are not well regarded. If you look at the reputation in society, we're pretty low, and often because we earned it. I'm sorry to say.
No, I was going to say right down there with politicians and journalists.
Yeah, well, and you know, there people. I mean, in general, people are very suspicious of people, in the leadership class of the country because often we haven't delivered to people, delivered for ourselves, rather than a byproduct.
You got a great message there, and I really hope you can get that out more.
Well, this would be one of the privileges. When I heard that you were going to come, I thought, well, you know, you never know who all's going to listen to this, but this is the sort of forum that multiplies out a story. So I consider it a great privilege, and Deere, of course, is the, you know, the example of it, and I was a steward of it. That's another. I think I did mention that in my talk tonight, because that's a concept. You know, is you're there to take care of it for a while. It's not yours. It's a public company.
Same kind of thing with public television. And
yeah, exactly,
exactly.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And this is what, you know, Bill did at Northern, right, Deere, Illinois Tool Works. Of course, Jim's successor, you know, died. Did you hear that? Which is really sad. I had recruited him. He took over Illinois Tool Works, and I had recruited him to the Deere board, actually, and wonderful leader. And he got cancer about the same time I did. We were comparing notes about our treatments and so forth. He was still a sitting CEO, though, which was a particularly big challenge. But we compared notes and would talk from time to time. And although we were just talking about how many of us are survivors, sadly he was not. And then last December we ended up going to his funeral, which was, I talked to him just a couple weeks before he went into his coma, and he was very optimistic. He was in remission, but you know, this is a pesky disease. Yeah. There's a wonderful book. Are you familiar with this Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Emperor of Maladies? Are you by any chance?
No,
I'd recommend it to you.
I'm
It's called The Emperor of Maladies.
Huh.
And obviously cancer being the emperor. And then the subtitle is A Biography of Cancer. And it goes through, and it talks about cancer from the very earliest days.
Wait a minute, is this the Indian doctor?
Yes, yeah. Well, he has an Indian name. He teaches at Columbia University.
Yeah.
He's done quite a bit, you know, and the book reads. The reason it got the Pulitzer Prize is it's such a technical book about a disease reads so well. He's a great writer.
Well, I read a synopsis of it in the New Yorker
Yes.
maybe 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's about
Okay,
right.
yeah.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a wonderful book, and when you read it, you realize, as I mentioned earlier, that how grateful we are to have this disease today versus 30 years ago. Because 30 years ago, if you got it, they really hadn't modulated you. Basically, they kind of did surgery till there was nothing more to take out. They did radiation till there were all sorts of and chemo till you revert into just to the edge of dying.
Yeah. Poisoning the cells.
Yeah, actually, and it is you are taking on poison. That's what it is. It's a controlled poison. But he explains this and the progress and all the scientists involved very, very well. It's like my fellow laureate there who could explain. What was it? Tim Johnson, was that his name you mentioned? Or,
yes.
That could explain things well on television.
It was great meeting him because I watched him 30 years on ABC.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
just a
You had to
nice
see
guy.
him. Yeah.
And I didn't know until I started researching his background that he was also a pastor.
Yeah, that's right. We were
And-
comparing notes there a little bit with.
Yeah.
Although I'm not a pastor, as you can tell, I have the roots in the faith, and it impacted. And of course, he actually has the divinity degree. A graduate of North Park College, I think, as I recall.
That sounds right. And he ended up going to medical school.
Yeah.
And just,
Yeah, and a wonderful communicator of things. So this book is, in a way, like him, is a very good communication.
That's what I meant. I did read that. I read the synopsis and
Yeah.
thought it was very well done. And it made it very accessible.
Yeah, very. I'm sure, because the book itself, when you look at it, it's one you'd think it's
Holy
a
cow.
tome that you wouldn't, and particularly on that subject. But he just writes. It's almost like a page turner.
I heard something the other day. We have a medical school at Southern, and there was an interview on our NPR station. There is now a move to integrate physical therapy, a holistic approach to when a person gets the diagnosis
Yeah.
and all that. There's a whole plan that is evolving to make sure that the person never really loses muscle tone. They keep as active as they can be, so they'll make a better, fuller recovery.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that was really interesting.
It is a wonderful concept versus, because you obviously are damaging the body. They told me up at Mayo when I did some second opinions up there. Well, not only do you have the disease, but the treatments are going to knock you down too. So you have double, you're going to have to just work harder to stay in good health, because my particular type will almost inevitably come back. There's no cure for it yet, but they want you to be in as good a possible health, to your
Right.
point, so that when it does come, you are then able to fight it off well.
Right. It was all about nutrition going into it and beyond, and about exercise, about everything. I thought,
Yeah.
that is such a really good idea.
It's a holistic, a
Yeah.
very holistic
Yeah.
approach,
Yeah.
to say the least. Well, I hope it'll go well for you, and
Yeah, obviously you
I thank you very much for bringing your expertise to this, and